When Gende eventually looked down beyond the tall grasses and branches covering the rest of her body, he finally saw the strangest thing he had ever seen. Instead of legs, she had a large, beautiful, glistening, gold-encrusted fishtail for legs. Alas, she was a mermaid. However, there was a problem. It turned out there was a powerful storm the night before, and while she was out playing, the powerful storm had carried her to the shore, and now she was caught in a large trap meant for hyenas. Gende had heard many stories of mermaids, and how they usually entrapped their male victims with their mesmerizing voices and siren songs. He fell in love with the mermaid, and his village suffered for it. Once upon a time, a small boy named Gende lived in a faraway village, located between large mountains and a mighty river. Gende's father, who was a warrior, had died in battle, leaving only his mother to care for him. Gende, while stronger than most children, was known for being very kind, loving, and respectful. Gende especially hated bullies, and made it a point to free most victims of bullies from their assailants whenever he could. One day, when Gende was 10, while strolling around the village, he saw a bunch of boys beating on another boy who was around his age mates as well. The bullies seemed to be enjoying themselves. Gende, known for his anger whenever he saw any form of injustice being done, quickly ran towards the sea and beat up all the 7 bullies. He stretched his hand to the bullied boy and said, "Hello, my name is Gende. You are free to go now. What is your name?" The other boy took his hand and said, "Thank you. My name is Lambda. Thank you for saving me." The 2 boys quickly got along, and after a few days, they were going everywhere together. They became known around the village as best friends. And while Lambda was the mischievous one, Gende was always there to keep him out of trouble. One day, when the boys were around 16 years of age, Gende went to the river to fish as usual. But as he was casting his net, he heard a faint cry coming from the bush nearby. At first, he ignored it, thinking it was just his mind. But he soon realized he was hearing the cry for real. He quickly ran to the parts of the bush to see what it was, and behold, it was a younger girl who looked around his age. She tried to hide her face when she heard him approaching, but she could not move. Gende could only see the top half of her body, and he waved when he saw her. She stared at him curiously, as she didn't know what to do. "Hi," he said while waving gently at her. She waved back, mimicking him. He asked what she was doing there, and she looked down, indicating something was wrong. When Gende eventually looked down beyond the tall grasses and branches covering the rest of her body, he finally saw the strangest thing he had ever seen. Instead of legs, she had a large, beautiful, glistening, gold-encrusted fishtail for legs. Alas, she was a mermaid. However, there was a problem. It turned out there was a powerful storm the night before, and while she was out playing, the powerful storm had carried her to the shore, and now she was caught in a large trap meant for hyenas. Gende had heard many stories of mermaids, and how they usually entrapped their male victims with their mesmerizing voices and siren songs. However, he never believed everything he had heard about them. He didn't even believe they existed in the first place. One thing was certain: she was the most beautiful creature he had ever seen. Without saying anything else, Gende swung to action by trying to pry open the trap. After a few minutes of trying, he finally set the mermaid free. However, she still needed to get back in the water, and she had already lost so much blood. Her blood glowed, and it was ethereal. Gende mustered his strength and lifted her in his arms as he carried her towards the river. After walking a few meters, he finally reached the river and placed her gently in the river. The mermaid quickly swam into the river and disappeared below. Gende was happy that she had finally gone back home. but he still wished she had said thank you or something. To his surprise, some bubbles started to appear before the mermaid finally appeared and smiled at him. Then gently and kindly she murmured, "Thank you. My name is Princess Yamba. My mother is Queen Mbati. I am very grateful for your help. I will not forget this in a hurry." Gende was surprised that she could speak like humans. He smiled at her and told her she was welcome. Gende said he would love to see and play with her again, and she agreed. She helped him catch some fish and bid him farewell. When Gende returned to the village, his best friend Lambda was waiting for him. He told him he was worried about him since Gende never used to take so long whenever he went to fish. Gende laughed it off and told him that there was nothing to worry about. Gende lied, saying the storm the day before made it easy to catch fish that day, and that's why he was late. He was catching more fish. Lambda believed him and they went home together. When Gende got home, he told his mother about the mermaid, and she told him to be careful and not tell anyone about his encounter. She said humans have always been jealous of the power of mermaids and usually try to kill them when they see them. Gende thanked his mother for her advice and went to bed, but his heart was so full of excitement that he couldn't sleep. The next day, right as the sun was coming up, he ran to the river to see the mermaid, hoping she would be at the river as well. However, he was disappointed when he arrived at the river and didn't see her there. It dawned on him that he had no way to call her out, and mermaids were not exactly creatures that would be seen lurking around. Just when he was about to give up, he heard a beautiful siren song. It was Princess Iyamba. She looked beautiful, and she had an ethereal glow about her. She looked more powerful too. Gende guessed the water had an effect on her. "Hi Gende. I was beginning to lose hope that I would never see you again," she said. Her voice was gentle and calm. Gende could feel it having a soothing effect on him. Gende smiled and moved closer to the river. Seeing her now, under the morning sun, Gende realized she was even more beautiful than he had first thought. "I would never have missed seeing you for anything under the sun," Gende said. To avoid being seen by passers-by, Iyamba told him to get in his boat so they could both go to a more secluded part of the river, a part of the riverbank where humans usually do not go. Once Gende got in the boat, he felt a sudden jolt as the wind rushed to his face. He looked back and realized that Princess Iyamba was pushing the boat across the river at great speed. In an instant, he found himself on the opposite side of the river, a place where the weather was calmer and everything seemed cool. The birds sang beautifully, and every plant around there glowed. Princess Yamba's dark, scaly skin glowed as her long golden dreads flowed behind her. Gende stepped out of the boat, and to his surprise, Yamba stepped out of the river. But instead of a large glowing tail, she had beautiful legs that matched the tone of her skin. She was beautiful and curvy with blue eyes. Gende was mesmerized. He wondered why myths warned people about mermaids. She seems quite harmless, he thought. Gende spent the whole day with her and only returned when the sun retired for the day, and it was getting too hard to see. Princess Yamba told Gende everything about their kingdom, mermaids, and their many powers as the days went by. Every day, from one full moon to the next, Gende would disappear without telling his friend Lambda, and he would only return when the day was over. But every time he returned with a lot of fish, even when other fishermen were having difficulty catching any fish. Only Gende's mother knew where Gende was going every day, and she kept it a secret. She was simply happy that her son was spending more time with someone other than Lambda. Lambda began to feel left out as he spent less time around his best friend. He knew Gende was hiding something, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. One day, he decided he had had enough and confronted Gende about the situation. "Gende, my friend, I have known you for so many years now, Since we were kids, we have done everything together, but somehow, all of a sudden, you have started doing things alone. Is there something that I did to deserve this? Talk to me, my friend." Gende smiled, unsure whether to reveal his secret to his friend or not. In an instant, he decided he could trust his friend with his secret. "I have found a girl, and I think I will marry her," Gende said, grinning from ear to ear. Lambda was confused because he had never seen Gende take notice of any girl in their village before. "Is she from this village?" Lambda asked curiously, furrowing his brow. "Yes, she is, and she isn't." Lambda looked genuinely confused, but before he could say anything else, Gende promised to take Lambda to his love interest. He promised he would like her. However, he told him he needed to ask her first. The next day, Gende asked Princess Yamba if he could bring his best friend along with him on his next visit. Yamba disagreed at first, saying she wasn't sure if she could trust his friend like she trusted him. But Gende convinced her that he trusted his best friend Lambda with his life. She eventually agreed to let him come to see her. The following day, Gende took Lambda to the river. At first, Lambda was confused about what they were doing at the river. Lambda asked Gende why they were at the river, and Gende simply told him to get in the boat. Once the two of them got in the boat, Gende whistled in the pattern he and Yamba had already agreed on as their signature call. And a few moments later, the boats began to whip across the river at blistering speeds. Once the boat reached the other end of the river, Yamba came out of the river in a mermaid form. Lambda was afraid and wanted to run away at first, but Gende assured him that it was fine. He told Lambda that Yamba was the woman of his dreams, and that is who he intended to marry. Lambda, like Gende, was immediately stunned by Yamba's beauty. Her glowing blue eyes, golden brown skin, golden fish scales that wrapped around her large fish tail, and the many accessories that wove around Yamba's neck and body made her look like an otherworldly deity with immense beauty. It wasn't long before Gende and Lambda started going to the river together to see Yamba. Gende, Lambda and Yamba became good friends. However, while Lambda had also fallen in love with Yamba had eyes for only one man, and it was Gende. After a year of courtship, it was clear that Gende was going to marry Yamba, and Lambda had accepted his fate that he would not be the one to marry the beautiful mermaid. In the village, only Gende's mother knew about the mermaid, as it was forbidden for humans to interact with mermaids according to the traditions of the land. Just 1 month before the wedding day, Gende and Yamba had a serious fight, and this caused Gende to leave the riverbank in anger. Gende had told Yamba that she would need to transform into a complete human form in order to live with him as his wife. But Yamba told him that she loved her home too much to leave, and that she already assumed that he would be the one to take on the form of a merman when they got married. The both of them couldn't agree on who should compromise on their present form and home, and this caused a huge fight between them. Are you enjoying the story so far? Please remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more beautiful stories like this. As always, enjoy the story. The next day, Gende went back to the river to apologize for the fights that they had. He whistled out to her like he always did, but something strange happened. There was no reply. Gende continued to call out to Yamba, but there was no response still. Gende eventually gave up when the sun began to fade away. He came back again to try the next day, and the day after that, for 14 days in a row, but he still got no response. He eventually gave up trying to call on Yamba. He concluded that when she was ready to forgive him, she would come out. However, the first month passed, and there was no sign of Yamba. Gende was still hopeful. He kept thinking to himself, mermaids must have very bad tempers. Then the second month passed, and there was still no sign of Yamba. Gende became worried and tried searching for Yamba around the riverbanks, but there was still no signs of Yamba. A year passed and Gende had not set his eyes on Yamba. in all that time. Gende had become miserable and detached from everything and everyone. He was no longer interested in most things he used to do. Gende stopped fishing, stopped going out with friends, and stopped socializing in general. Lambda tried his best to cheer him on, but Gende was inconsolable. There was nothing anyone could say to get Gende out of his misery. Even Gende's mother was powerless in convincing her son to move on with his life. After a year and a half, Lambda had become a very successful fisherman, drawing praise from people in his village and beyond. He had become one of the wealthiest people in the village, while Gende was still entrenched in his misery. Gende had become satisfied with doing nothing every day and surviving on the harvest from his small farm. Gende had become a shell of the man he used to be. His best friend Lambda, on the other hand, was respected by everyone in the village, and he even married a beautiful wife, and they were expecting a child. Everything seemed to be going well for everyone in the village but Gende. At least it seemed that way until one day, a woman ran frantically into town, wailing and screaming for help. In a few minutes, villagers gathered around and asked what happened. She told them her husband had gone out to fish in the morning, and she was helping out at the bank when all of a sudden she saw him fall into the water, but he never came back up. The only thing she saw was blood in the river. A search party was immediately sent out to the river to look for her husband. However, there was no sign of him. In the months that followed, 20 other people went missing by the riverbank or close to it. The king of the village eventually forbade anyone from going to the river to fetch water alone, but fishing at the river was banned completely. The villagers were forced to fetch water from the river in the neighboring village. However, the law did not stop the villagers' misery, as children started going missing in the middle of the night. Parents would wake up to find their children's mats empty. The village had become a place where no new visitors wanted to venture. The king was perplexed, and he called on the oracle for help. The oracle was a well-built old man who looked like he could be in his 70s, but he moved like a young hunter in his 20s. No one really knew his age, but rumors say he had been alive for 6 generations. The oracle stepped into the palace, a menacing aura revolving around him. His bead-laced dread dragging behind him as he walked, his beautifully carved staff hitting the floor in successive rhythms. The silence in the room was palpable. "King Adigo," he whispered loudly, "you have a problem in your village. The disappearance of children from their homes and adults from the river is just the beginning of your problem. Things are about to go from bad to worse soon if you don't appease the gods that one of your subjects has offended." The king was confused. Offended? How? The oracle grunted before he continued. "Someone in this village has angered the goddess of the river, and until they surrender and confess what they did, the village will never know peace." The warning of the oracle was announced to the rest of the village, but even after a week, nobody came forward. One morning, Lambda woke up to see his pregnant wife missing and traces of blood around their room. For a brief second, he saw a blue eye glowing in his room before it suddenly disappeared. Lambda ran to Gende for help, saying he should help save his wife and child. He begged him to try to appease the goddess of the river for breaking the heart of one of their daughters. The next day, Gende went to the palace and requested for the oracle. When the oracle arrived, Gende confessed that he was the one who broke the unspoken rule of interacting with the mermaids. He confessed that the last time he saw Iyamba, the love of his life, she was very angry with him, and that is why all of these have been happening. The oracle smiled and looked at him before saying, "You are not the cause of this village's problem." Then, in an instant, he turned to Lambda and yelled at him in a magic voice,
"Confess your sins, son."
In an instant, almost as if Lambda was taken over by spirits, his eyes began to glow as he confessed that he was the one who angered the goddess of the river. He explained that on the day when Gende and Yamba had their fight, Gende told him all about it and expressed how sorry he felt. Lambda told Gende to go and apologize the next day. But that same evening, Lambda went back to the river carrying a machete. He whistled like Gende usually did. When Yamba came out of the river, he told her Gende was in trouble and she needed to come with him immediately. Yamba immediately jumped out of the river and was about to transform into a human form when Lambda cut her tail clean off. Yamba quickly transformed into a human form to avoid bleeding out, but after that she lost her power. Lambda then hit her in the head until she was unconscious, before secretly carrying her to the village. He confessed that he had locked her up for over a year and a half while using the powers from her tail to make himself more successful. Gende was confused as he asked with tears in his eyes, "But why, Lambda? Why would you do something like that?" Lambda replied, still in a trance-like state, "I did it because I was jealous of how happy the two of you were. Did you not realize that I was in love with Yamba too? No matter what I did or how I tried, she always chose you. So I decided that if I can't have her, nobody should." Gende looked mortified on hearing the actions of his friend. "So where is she now?" Lambda took them to a small opening under his hut, which looked like a small prison. In there lay Yamba, weak and lean, with no fight left in her. Her glowing blue eyes have lost their spark. With tears in his eyes, Gende walked into the underground prison and carried Yamba in his arms. With the villagers behind him, including Lambda and the oracle, they walked to the river, offering the river back its princess. In an instant, the river shook violently and the Queen Mermaid emerged, followed by an army of beautiful mermaid warriors. Behind the mermaid warriors were all the villagers that had ever gone missing from the village. All of them looked well and healthy. The mermaid queen, the goddess of the river, thanked Gende for returning her daughter to her and bowed to the village oracle as a sign of respect. Before leaving with her daughter, the queen said, "This is why we forbade the interactions between humans and mermaids. The hearts of humans are filled with jealousy, hatred, and wickedness. And yes, there are kind humans like Gende and the almighty oracle among you. But your kind always descend to chaos sooner or later." On saying this, the mermaids started to disappear. Gende looked back at his mom and he ran to her, telling her that he wanted to go and live in the water with Yamba. His mother nodded, saying she expected nothing less. However, his mother had a secret of her own. She too was a mermaid and only stayed behind after her husband's friend murdered him because he was in love with her. However, she was not as forgiving as the queen had been. She sought retribution and ended the life of her husband's killer, which was why she was banished from the mermaid kingdom in the first place. On hearing her story, the mermaid queen welcomed her back to the kingdom and she welcomed Gende too. Gende, alongside his mother and Princess Yamba, would go on to live as a family in the river. Lambda was handed over to the mermaids to spend the rest of his life as their prisoner. His pregnant wife was released unharmed and told about her husband's transgressions. The villagers returned to living their peaceful, prosperous lives afterward, and any relationship between mermaids and humans was forbidden forever. Nobody ever really saw a mermaid again after that day. This story teaches us that even when we have people we love and trust in our lives, it's not everything that we must tell them. Even those with the best intentions can become bitter and jealous of our progress. Of course, you still need people you can trust in your life, but it is advised to be selective of what you trust them with. Like a Yoruba adage says, one does not dare a wicked person to do his worst. This means never tempt evil people to do their evil. The end. We hope you enjoyed the story you just watched. Please subscribe to our channel and like this video as it helps us create more videos like this for you to enjoy. Thank you.